Assalamualaikum and a very good morning and good afternoon to everyone. This week we will go into topic 23, which is plant evolution and diversity. I know this topic will be covered for your SCL. However, I will go through it very briefly, and then we will go into more details when it comes to the SCL presentations. So this topic will be of chapter 23 of your MEDA textbook, which is Plant Evolution and Diversity, which starts on page 410 up until 432. Okay, so we will cover all the subtopics in the plant evolution and diversity topic, which is the first one. Will cover the ancestry and features of land plants, and then we'll go over to the evolution of bryophyte, which is colonization of land, and then we will go into lycophytes, which has the vascular tissue. And then we'll go next into the pteridophytes, which have the megaphils. And the last one, we will go into the evolution of seed plants, which is the full adaptation to land. Okay, so the learning outcome for this topic, we have 3 here, which is by the end of this lecture, you should be able to list the traits that enable the plants to adapt to life on land. And the next one is to evaluate the differences in the alternation of generation of land plants. And the last one, you should be able to compare and contrast between seed and seedless plants. So we will go into the first subtopic, which is 23.1 from your MEDA textbook, which is on ancestry and features of land plants. Okay, so plants are multicellular, synthetic eukaryotes. And then when we say plant evolution, what comes through your mind? So when you say evolution, it actually marks the adaptation to their existence on land. Okay, when they try to adapt to be living on land. So plant systematists usually use molecular and also morphological information to classify plants and group them into different kingdom and different phylum. Okay, so phylogenetic information suggests that the modern plant groups arose in a particular sequence. At first, plants are thought to have evolved from a freshwater green algae. So the green algae contains chlorophyll and also accessory pigments, and they store excess carbohydrates as starch, and they also have cellulose in their cell walls. So the differences between algae and plants are plants protect their zygote, and also they protect and nourish the embryo. So that is the main difference between plants and green algae. So this shows you the green algae. So this part here, the first one is the embryo of the green algae Odogonium. Okay, so if you see the embryo here, it is not protected. It is unprotected. It doesn't have any capsule, or it is not enclosed in a seed. Okay, for this one here, for the land plant, which is Capsella, you can see that the embryo is inside the seed, so it is enclosed. So the embryo is protected and also nourished. Okay, so based on the comparison of the DNA and also the RNA-based sequences in both the land plants and also the green algae, so scientists suggested that the land plants are most closely related to a particular group of freshwater green algae known as the charophytes. Okay, this is the charophytes. So the charophytes and land plants are in the same clade. Their common ancestor no longer exists. So molecular data shows that the charophytes and the land plants are in the same clade and form a monophyletic group. So the characteristics common between those two, both of them have cellulose cell wall, and they have apical cells, and they also have plasmodesmata and also placenta. The placenta is used to retain and to care or nourish for the zygote. There are a few adaptations that is required for a land environment. So when plants move from water to land, they needed a mechanism to deal with water loss, gravity, and also the exposure of the sun. So because of they usually the algae were from the moist environment, from water environment. So when they go into a drier land environment, they are in constant threat of desiccation or drying out. So they need something or some adaptation in them where it can protect all phases of reproduction from drying out. Okay, and the seed plants must disperse their embryos within the seed, which provides the embryo with food within a protective seed coat. So that is the difference between the seed plants and the algae. Okay, so then in the water environment, it must provide plentiful of water, and it also must provide support for the body of the plant. Okay, next we will go into the evolutionary history of plants. Okay, if you observe this figure here, we have the common green algae ancestor. Okay, and then we have the first split. The first split, so the trait is the embryo protection. So we have a yes and a no. If no embryo protection, will lead us to the freshwater green algae. And if a yes for the embryo protection, we have the plants. So if you observe closely here on the right, we have the non-vascular and also the vascular plants. Okay, so what is the difference between the non-vascular and also the vascular? So the main difference between a vascular and non-vascular plants is that a vascular plant has a vascular vessels to carry water and food to all the different parts of the plants. Okay, so we have the phloem, which is the vessel that transports the food, and we have the xylem, which is the vessel that transport water. So on the other hand, for the non-vascular plant, doesn't have a vascular system. So this means that the non-vascular plants are much smaller than the vascular plants. So, and this is one of the simplest way that you can distinguish between the vascular and the non-vascular plant. So if we have the two clade here, for the first one we have the non-vascular, which is this clade here all the way here. This is all non-vascular. Okay, and then we have the vascular plant on top. So this is the main difference. Okay, vascular tissue consists of the lithophytes, the pteridophytes, the gymnosperm, and the angiosperm. While for the non-vascular plants, we have the bryophytes. Okay, so next trait that separates them are the megaphyll and the microphyll. So these are vascular tissues. However, the main difference between them are the differences between the microphyll and the megaphyll and the microphyll. So microphylls have leaves that have a single unbranched vein. Okay, while for the megaphyll, they have leaf with multiple vein. Okay, so if microphyll, we have the lycophyte. So if we have the megaphyll, we have the pteridophytes, gymnosperm, and the angiosperm. Okay, so what separates next is the trait seed. Whether it is seed, it has seed, or it is seedless. Okay, if seed, we have the breakdown for gymnosperm and the angiosperm. While if it is a no, seedless, it becomes the pteridophyte, which is the fern and allis. Okay, so after fern, we have the fruit. Okay, fruit differentiate between the gymnosperm and the angiosperm, which is the flowering plants. So if no fruits, we have the gymnosperm. For the fruit, we call them as the angiosperm, which is the flowering plants. Okay, so these are the key groups of plants and their features. So you have to remember this. Okay, so first thing first, we have the freshwater algae. freshwater green algae, which is the charophytes. They live in water, they have haploid life cycle, they share certain traits with the land plants. Okay, then we go on into the land plants. Land plants, the first one that is non-vascular are the bryophytes. Okay, because they are non-vascular, they don't have the support, which is they are low-lying. Okay, they don't have a true stem and true roots. Okay, so these are non-vascular plants that prefer moist location. They have a dominant gametophyte phase, which produces flagellated sperm. Unbranched dependent sporophyte produces windblown spores. Okay, and then next the difference between the non-vascular and the vascular plants. So vascular plants, we have quite a few. We have the lycophytes, we have the fern and allis, which we call the pteridophyte. Okay, and then we go on into the seed plants. Seed plants, we have gymnosperm and angiosperm, but the difference between the two is they have one does not flower, which is this one gymnosperm, and another one have flowers, and also this one angiosperm bears fruit, while gymnosperm does not bear any fruit. Okay, so gymnosperm, they are usually large, they are cone bearing, they exist as trees in forests. Sporophyte bears the pollen cone. Okay, so gymnosperm, the examples are mostly conifers, cycads, gingos, gnatophyte. Okay, but for angiosperm are any flowering plants that you can see. This dominates the plant kingdom, which is the angiosperm, because we see them everywhere. Okay. Okay, so there are a few characteristics that plants need for them to be able to adapt on land. So the first one is to conserve water, the land plant body is covered by a waxy cuticle. Okay, so it is impervious to water while still allowing carbon dioxide to enter so that photosynthesis can continue. Okay, so we have the cuticle, waxy cuticle. It is waterproof. Okay. So next one, we have the stomata. Stomata are tiny openings or pores mostly on the underside of the leaf. So this is for the gas exchange. So the third one, they have the vascular system, which transport water in the body of the land plant. And the tracheates can be present or absent in the different land plants. And also facilitate upward transport of water and minerals. So the next point, the bodies of the land plants are composed of mostly 3D tissues. So tissues provide land plants with increased ability to avoid water loss at their surfaces. Okay, the next one, the land plants are exposed to higher UV intensity. Okay, so they have to have the adaptation to bear the UV intensity. However, this UV intensity can lead to mutations. Okay, so by mutation it means that there is a diploid genome which can hide effect of a deleterious allele. Okay, so the next one, we have the terrestrial plant have a diploid and haploid generation. Okay, so there are 6 adaptations to land that you have to know. Okay, so what does it mean by diploid and haploid generation? Diploid allows for more genetic variability in land plants. So diploid means it involves fertilization. Okay, so please remember all these 6 points. Okay, next we go on into the alternation of generations. So all land plants exhibit alternation of generations. So plants have 2 alternating forms in the course of its life cycle. So they have the haploid, which is here, this part here, gametophyte, and they have the diploid phase, which is the sporophyte. So the multicellular haploid individuals, called the gametophyte, produces multicellular 2N individuals. Okay, and then the multicellular 2N, which is called the sporophyte, then produces the haploid individuals by meiosis. Okay, let's go through this again. Sporophyte is diploid. So multicellular, start here, this is the sporophyte. Okay, multicellular individual produces spores by meiosis. Okay, so the haploid spore develops into new organism without fusing with another reproductive cell. Okay, so without fusing, it will become haploid. So it will becomes the gametophyte. So the spore undergoes mitosis and becomes new multicellular gametophyte. Okay. So after that, what happens? So gametophyte is a multicellular individual that produces gametes. Okay, gametes are haploid as well. So these gametes then fuse in fertilization to form the zygote, which is the diploid. So zygote is a diploid cell that will become the spore-forming sporophyte. So this is the alternation of generation where it becomes diploid and also haploid. Okay, so lastly, we will go into the dominant generation. So land plants differ as to which generation is dominant. So that is whether it's more conspicuous or another word for it, it is more visible or clearly visible. Okay, so in plants such as the mosses, okay, we have the mosses, the first one, which is here, moss, which is bryophyte. Okay, the gametophyte is dominant. Okay, you can see here the gametophyte is dominant. Okay, so this part here we have the gametophytes, so they are dominant. So in plants such as the fern, the pine trees, the peach trees, the sporophyte is dominant, which is this part here, sporophyte, the blue part. All of this is up from this line is all sporophyte. Okay, so the sporophyte is dominant. So in the history of land plants, a vascular system evolves only in the sporophyte. Okay, so vascular system evolves only in the sporophyte. So what we can see here, it starts from the fern to the gymnosperm, gymnosperm and the angiosperm. Okay, so the shift to the sporophyte dominance is an adaptation to life on land. So notice that the sporophyte gain in dominance and the gametophyte becomes more and more microscopic. See, look at the level. See, the sporophyte is more dominant towards the later stage, which is the angiosperm. So the gametophyte also becomes dependent on the sporophyte. So another thing that you have to notice is the reduction in the size of the gametophyte and the increase in the size of the sporophyte. Okay, so this trend occurs as these plants become adapted for life on land. So in the moss and the fern, spores disperse in gametophyte. So in gymnosperm and angiosperm, the seed disperse in sporophyte. Okay, so this part here, spores, and these are seed. Okay, so that is all for the first part of the lecture, which is 23.1. So we will go into details on each of the phyla or the lineage.